Number 15. Tabitha Melki. Late one night in August 2022, a barefoot woman entered a convenience store in Ponchatoula, Louisiana with a large knife in her hand. Later identified as 32-year-old Tabitha Melki, the suspect allegedly went behind the counter and stabbed an employee multiple times. The worker hit the emergency alarm, but Melki had fled the scene by the time police arrived, so they circulated a surveillance photo of her and appealed to the public for information on her whereabouts. They didn't have to look far or for very long, however. 4 days after the gas station assault, Melki flipped her pickup truck alongside a highway. A deputy stopped to offer help, but Melki allegedly brandished a knife and threatened to hurt herself. To stop that from happening, the deputy resorted to non-lethal means to subdue the suspect and called for backup. Melki was taken to the hospital for an observation period. From there, she was booked into custody on charges of second-degree attempted murder, vehicle burglary, and terrorizing. As of early 2024, she remains behind bars at the Tangipahoa Parish Jail. Number 14. Caitlyn Thomas. 23-year-old Caitlyn Thomas had her driver's license revoked in 2023, and like many people who are banned from driving, she didn't let it stop her from getting behind the wheel of her Audi and operating it in an extremely dangerous fashion. Thomas was driving in the Welsh community of Clinician with dummy license plates on her vehicle when she spotted a police cruiser, and instead of playing it cool, she panicked at the mere sight of the cop car. Her nervousness was reflected in her driving, and the officer attempted to pull her over. Thomas had law enforcement on a high-speed pursuit through the suburbs of Cardiff. She reached speeds as high as 70 miles per hour as she blew through stop signs. She eventually lost control of her car and crashed it, and was taken into custody on suspicion of multiple crimes. A police spokesperson said it was a miracle that nobody got hurt. Thomas pleaded guilty to driving while disqualified, dangerous driving, failing to stop for police, and driving without insurance. The judge sentenced her to 10 months in prison and banned her from driving for 3 years. Number 13. Camy Ludwick. Before he became addicted to drugs, 47-year-old William Shane Nolan was a judge in Tarrant County, Texas. But the drugs unfortunately took over his life, and he died in November 2023 from a combination of fentanyl and a psychotropic medication called trazodone. Nolan's untimely death came on the heels of a new law in Texas, which allows the authorities to charge someone with murder if they provide fentanyl that ends up being used in a fatal overdose. Among the first to be charged under the recently implemented policy is 35-year-old Camy Ludwick, who allegedly bought the pills that Nolan overdosed on. The former judge was found dead on the floor of his bedroom at his home in Grapevine, with a scattering of pills labeled M30 laying nearby. Responding officers also found cocaine, oxycodone, and Xanax, as well as a cut straw that looked like it had been used to snort drugs. Ludwick placed a 911 call after waking up and finding Nolan unresponsive. Her phone contained evidence that she had obtained the deadly drugs from dealers in Fort Worth and Louisiana, including 2 Texas dealers known only as Blue and T. Camy remains free on bail while awaiting the next steps in the case. Her attorney, Tiffany Burks, told Fox 4 that her office is proudly defending Camy. Criminal defense attorney Zachary Ferguson, who is not affiliated with Camy's case, told Fox News that he thinks it will be a difficult case for the prosecution to prove. He explained that the new law has primarily been used against drug dealers and suppliers, rather than someone who obtains drugs from a dealer for a friend. The outcome of the case remains to be seen. Number 12. Alex Bania. Some people are truly terrifying when they black out from anger. 49-year-old Alex Bania of Gilchrist County, Florida, certainly earned that distinction in 2019 when he was accused of cutting off the private part of his wife's lover. According to police, Bania barged into the man's mobile home with a gun and threatened to shoot him if he tried to stop what was about to happen. Bania allegedly forced the victim into his bedroom, then tied him up and cut the body part off with a pair of scissors. He then fled the residence with the severed body part in hand. The disturbing act of violence appeared to be Bania's way of getting revenge after he had walked in on the victim sleeping with his wife 2 months earlier. Bania's stepdaughter, his wife's daughter from a previous relationship, defended her stepfather to the Gainesville Sun, stating, "He's a good man who married a stupid woman. That's all there is to say." Bania was arrested later that evening on multiple charges, including armed burglary, aggravated battery, aggravated assault, false imprisonment, displaying a firearm while committing a felony, and more. The victim survived, but it's unclear whether he was ever made whole again. In 2021, Bania pleaded guilty to kidnapping and aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, followed by 10 years of probation. Number 11. Lisa Dykes. In October 2020, 23-year-old Maricelo Bateo Valadez traveled from her home in Seattle to visit a friend in Dallas, Texas. On the third day of her trip, she got into an Uber outside her friend's house and never returned. Maricela was last seen leaving a nightclub with a man during the early morning hours. Her bank and phone activities stopped completely after that. Surveillance footage, phone records, and other evidence showed that the young woman had visited several nightclubs. Police identified the man Maricela was seen leaving the club with as 31-year-old Charles Beltran. Maricela spent time at the homes of Beltran and 57-year-old Lisa Jo Dykes in Mesquite, where they were joined by 49-year-old Nina Tamar Marano. Investigators obtained warrants to search the residences and found that while both had been cleaned meticulously, there were bloodstains beneath the carpet. They also found Maricela's blood inside Beltran's bedroom. The suspects refused to cooperate with the investigation and left the state, which only made them look even more suspicious. But without a body, prosecutors were hard-pressed to come up with a strong enough case to formally charge the trio. More than 5 months later, in March 2021, Maricela's body was found in a remote wooded area in Wilma. By then, the evidence was strong enough to move forward with charges. Authorities tracked Dykes and Marano down in Florida, while Beltran was picked up in Utah, and they were all charged with murder. According to prosecutors, Dykes, Marano, and Beltran were in a three-way relationship with each other. The state theorized that Dykes had walked in on Marissa and Beltran in bed together and flew into a murderous rage. Dykes allegedly disposed of Maricela's body with help from Marano. Dykes took the stand in her own defense and denied stabbing Maricela. Both Beltran and Marano testified that Dykes was Beltran's sugar mama, but Beltran denied having a physical relationship with the much older woman, insisting that Dykes was simply investing money in his up-and-coming rap career. He also denied sleeping with Maricela, but they ended up in the same bed one way or another, and it seemed to trigger the out-of-control jealousy that compelled Dykes to kill. Dykes' defense attorney, Heath Harris, urged the judge for leniency. He described the cold-blooded killing as a crime of passion, which can sometimes lead to reduced sentences under Texas law. Speaking about his client, Harris also said, "For some reason, she lost it that night." Prosecutors fought for a much different goal, insisting that Dykes deserved to spend life in prison without parole. In the words of lead prosecutor Robin Pittman, Dykes had all the tools to do the right things in life and to lead a good life without murdering an innocent 23-year-old. While a defendant's potential to be rehabilitated is usually taken into consideration in determining their sentence, the state argued that doing so wasn't necessary in this case. Echoing the prosecution's sentiments, the judge sentenced Dykes to life plus 20 years. Maricela's brother gave a poignant victim impact statement, which he concluded with one simple wish: "I hope that you get what you deserve in that prison cell." The murder charges against Beltran and Marano were ultimately dropped, but the pair each still face a charge for tampering with evidence. Number 10. Chris Northam Jr. 44-year-old Chris Northam Sr. and his 24-year-old son Chris Jr. operated their family's extreme sports business together in Roseville, California. In May of 2011, Chris Sr. was fatally gunned down inside the business in broad daylight. Chris Jr.'s wife, Avril Elizabeth Easley, frantically dialed 911 and reported hearing gunshots near the building. Officers arrived to find Chris Sr. lying motionless with gunshot wounds to the face and shoulder. The murder weapon was nowhere to be found, and there were no footprints, shell casings, signs of forced entry, or anything else to help further the investigation. In fact, the killer left so little evidence behind that detectives initially suspected that the murder may have been a professional hit. Based on the version of events put forth by Chris Jr., it sounded like the day started out normal. Chris Jr. told investigators that he and his father had attended a video chat meeting with a South African investor who expressed concerns about how the business's money was being spent. A short while later, Chris Sr. went to the company's warehouse. He mentioned a suspected burglary happening there, so Chris Jr. also drove to the warehouse. As he pulled into the parking lot, he heard multiple gunshots. He got away from the property and called his wife, who called the police. Detectives found it strange that Chris called his fiancée instead of just calling 911 himself. Chris also claimed that his father had recently received death threats from a disgruntled former employee named Ron Conn. There was some truth to it, but Conn was ultimately ruled out as a suspect. The South African investor was also cleared of any wrongdoing in the case. A closer look at the company's financial records revealed that there was just $44,000 left, despite the business having received $500,000 in funding from investors. In the months leading up to Chris Sr.'s murder, someone had stolen $160,000 from the account. The father-son duo were the only people with access to the company's bank accounts, leading suspicion to fall on Chris Jr. His phone records did not corroborate his story, but law enforcement still lacked enough evidence to nail him for his dad's murder. A break in the case finally came in 2011 after Chris Jr. and Avril Easley broke up. No longer feeling obligated to protect Chris, Easley told police that he had admitted to shooting his father. She said she had a really hard time picturing Chris being capable of such a horrific crime, but as time went on, it made more and more sense to think he was involved. After discovering the missing money, police entertained a new theory that Chris Sr. had discovered the stolen funds and confronted his son about it, leading to an argument that ended in death. Chris Noram Jr. was initially charged with murder, but ultimately pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 13 years in prison and was released early due to good behavior in 2022. Number 9. Camy Saunders. When a Dublin woman suspected her boyfriend of cheating on her in May of 2023, she tried to have a civilized discussion about her concerns. But 32-year-old Camy Saunders was in no mood to be accused, according to the victim, who claimed that her boyfriend responded to her attempts at conversation by punching her in the face. Officers arrived at the residence to find the woman suffering from a busted lip and a missing tooth. Saunders was hiding in a van outside the home and refused to come out, so the police forced their way into the vehicle. As they took Saunders into custody, he allegedly continued to resist while threatening the officers and their families. During a subsequent bail hearing, the victim testified to other previous domestic violence incidents between her and Saunders. She told the court that on one occasion, Saunders had threatened to pour hot tea on her if she didn't shut up, and then he did just that. According to the most recent available updates on the case, Saunders is facing an assault charge. More specifically, he's accused of displaying threatening, abusive, and insulting behavior toward the victim and threatening to kill or cause serious harm to a member of law enforcement. The victim continues to suffer from emotional trauma stemming from the incident, and she felt obligated to quit her job because Saunders knew she worked there and it made her feel unsafe. Saunders has since found a new partner and has reportedly had no contact with the victim, serving as a hopeful indicator that he'll leave her alone for good. Number 8. Samuel Davis. Most people in St. Louis County, Missouri, were preparing to watch fireworks as the sun set on the 4th of July in 2023. One unfortunate young man was lying injured and bloody in a field, apparently unable to get up on his own. A keen-eyed passerby noticed that there was a police cruiser from the neighboring Northwoods department parked near the man, who was suffering from a broken jaw. She found the situation unusual to begin with, because the Northwoods police did not have jurisdiction over the area where the situation was unfolding. But the onlooker became even more perplexed when the police car left the scene, leaving the ailing man all by himself, despite his clear need for medical help. The witness called 911 and St. Louis County deputies were dispatched to the scene. They got the man the help he needed, but they also wanted to know what happened to him and why it seemed like some cops had dumped him in a field to fend for himself. The county's Crimes Against Persons unit handled the investigation with full cooperation from the Northwoods Police Department. Several weeks after the incident, authorities announced the arrest of 26-year-old Northwoods officer Samuel Davis. According to court documents, Davis handcuffed the victim, put him in the back of his patrol car, and then turned off his body camera. Without advising dispatch about where he was going, Davis allegedly drove to the remote field where the man was found. Davis is also accused of beating the man with his baton, pepper spraying him, and warning him to never return to Northwoods. The crooked former cop encountered the victim while handling an incident at a Walgreens store, yet no report of the incident exists. Following his arrest on kidnapping and assault charges, Davis resigned from his job with the Northwoods Police Department. He remains free on bail while awaiting his next court date. The specific details of the interactions that led up to the alleged kidnapping are unclear, but Davis clearly abused his power and acted out of anger. If all the allegations he's facing are true, then one can only hope that he will never work as a police officer ever again, anywhere. Another officer, Michael Hill, is also facing charges in connection with the incident. Number 7. James Burns. James B. Burns became a quadriplegic in 1979 when his wife shot him in the back. Needless to say, the couple ended up getting divorced. Nearly 10 years later, Burns married his second wife, Bertha May. And he was probably hoping that this marriage would work out a lot better than the last, but the pair had been married for just 2 weeks when they got into the type of argument that often ends a relationship. The couple were at a lounge in Houston on a Monday night when the disagreement began. James would later claim that Bertha was intent on going to California to pursue custody of her child from a previous relationship. He didn't want his wife to do that for some reason, and the fight continued to escalate while both parties refused to budge on their stance. The argument ended by way of 3 gunshots, all of which struck Bertha. She died from her injuries, and it was clear that the bullets had come from James's direction. In his lap, police discovered a gun connected to a rigged contraption which enabled him to pull the trigger by pulling on a string with his mouth. But someone must have helped him set up the device and put the string in James's mouth. Witnesses told police they saw Bertha put the string in her husband's mouth, then saw James jerk his head back 3 times, 1 for each gunshot. James also claimed that Bertha had helped assemble the apparatus so he could fire the gun, and that she had persuaded him to shoot her. But witnesses also let police in on a little detail that James had failed to mention. He thought Bertha was cheating on him, which would have been plenty enough motive for James to commit the crime. Authorities filed a murder charge, but allowed James to stay at his mother's house because the local jail lacked the resources to accommodate his medical needs. The outcome of the case is a mystery. Number 6. Abil Malski. Even after his divorce was finalized, 39-year-old Australian national Abil Malski couldn't accept that his marriage was over. In 2021, he served 6 months in prison for threatening his ex-wife with a loaded gun in his possession. Prison isn't fun. For many people, even a short sentence is enough to discourage further brushes with the law. But Malski was not one of them, and he did not hesitate to re-offend following his release from prison. Malski was especially jealous of his ex-wife's new boyfriend, Stephen Grant. On Mother's Day in 2023, Malski spotted Grant selling flowers on the side of the road. With not even a morsel of concern for the safety of anyone around him, Malski parked his car, grabbed his gun, and began shooting at Grant while cars drove by. Over the next minute and a half, Malski chased after and continued shooting the victim. He fired at least 6 shots altogether, and 3 of the bullets became lodged in Grant's neck and back. Grant survived, but was left partially paralyzed. During Malski's trial, prosecutors said that the defendant couldn't accept his inability to control his ex-wife now that she had divorced him and moved on. Malski seemed to truly think that he deserved power over a woman's life, and that being in a relationship with someone meant that it was okay to deprive them of freedom. Malski had the audacity to claim that he had shot Grant in self-defense, but the jury didn't buy it. In late 2023, Malski was found guilty of attempted murder and sentenced to 20 years in prison. He'll become eligible for parole in 2039. As the judge announced the sentence, he described Malski's criminal conduct as very extreme behavior. Malski reacted by laughing and scoffing. He showed absolutely no remorse for his actions, which only seems to confirm that he's exactly where he belongs. The judge also acknowledged the importance of imposing a sentence that reflected Malski's crimes, in order to set the example to others that the authorities are unwilling to tolerate the stalking and terrorizing that comes with having an obsessed ex. Number 5. Cherry Cotton. During the early morning hours one day in February 2024, tenants at the Silver Collection apartment complex in Fredericksburg, Virginia, suddenly lost power. A suspected drunk driver had crashed the car through a fence and into a transformer box. Most of the building's renters were probably asleep at the time and didn't notice the outage, but at least half of the residents would go without electricity for much of the day. Police arrived at the scene around 4:30 a.m. to find 38-year-old Sherry M. Cotton sitting in her Buick Century with a flat tire. An officer kept trying to get Cotton to exit the vehicle, but she allegedly tried to drive away. When that didn't work, police say she got out of the car and tried running away. The officer quickly caught up with her and took her into custody. Cotton was charged with driving under the influence, refusal to take a blood-stroke-breath test, 2 counts of obstruction of justice, 2 counts of destruction of property, felony eluding, hit and run, and reckless driving on private property. This is Cotton's first DUI charge, but it may not be her first run-in with the police. According to a Fauquier Times report from 2021, a then 35-year-old woman named Cherry Cotton was convicted of assaulting a police officer and a sheriff's deputy who responded to a domestic incident at a hotel in Warrenton the previous year. One of the cops suffered serious injuries, including a broken wrist and a severe head wound. Police also encountered a man at the property who said he was there trying to pick his kids up from their mother. He accused Cotton of being high on narcotics. When police tried to de-escalate the situation, she allegedly became hysterical and continued to resist. Cotton was already on probation for multiple prior charges at the time of her 2020 arrest, including unlawful wounding, attempted robbery, and violating probation. Following her conviction for assaulting the police, she was sentenced to a year and a half in prison. The DUI case is ongoing. Number 4. Darren Win. 46-year-old Savas Savopoulos enjoyed vast wealth as the CEO and president of a highly successful construction company called American Iron Works. He owned a mansion in Washington, D.C.'s exclusive Woodley Park neighborhood, where he lived with his wife Amy Claire Savopoulos and their son. The couple also had 2 daughters who lived at boarding school. In May of 2015, neighbors noticed that the family's mansion was on fire and dialed 911. Firefighters rushed to the scene and entered the house, where they walked in on a real-life horror scene. Savas, Amy Claire, their son Philip, and the family's housekeeper Veralicia Figueroa had all been bound, robbed, beaten with baseball bats, and murdered. Afterward, the killer had set the house ablaze in an attempt to destroy evidence. DNA on the crust of a Domino's pizza that had been delivered to the house during the family's captivity turned up as a match to Darren Win, a welder who had worked for Savas Savopoulos several years earlier. Win had been fired from the job and had struggled ever since to find steady work, leading prosecutors to believe he spilled over with resentment toward his former boss. Believing that Win could no longer contain his rage and was desperate for money, prosecutors charged him with all 4 murders and accused him of acting alone. In court, the prosecution accused Win of holding the victims hostage overnight until a bag filled with $40,000 cash was dropped off at the house. Instead of just taking the money and leaving, the intruder chose to execute them in cold blood. Win denied acting alone. In fact, he insisted he had nothing to do with the quadruple murder, period. Testifying in his own defense during his trial, he claimed that his brother Daryl had lured him to the Savopoulos family's home with the promise of a painting and drywalling job. Darren admitted to touching the pizza crust, claiming that his brother had handed him the slice, but told the court that he left the house the second he got the impression that something shady was going on. In October 2018, a jury found Darren guilty of 20 charges, including murder, kidnapping, and extortion. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and has filed multiple appeals in an attempt to get his convictions thrown out. But the court has upheld the original ruling each and every time so far. Darren Win has never been charged in connection with the case, and it's unclear whether authorities continue to believe Darren worked alone. Number 3. Lloyd Saunders. When Lloyd Saunders hit his girlfriend Kelly Evans in the face during an argument at his home in December 2016, she was unwilling to tolerate the abuse. Kelly got up to leave, but Lloyd slammed the bedroom door shut and said she wasn't going anywhere. He allegedly continued to slap Kelly in the face and choked her while she screamed for help and tried fighting him off. Lloyd stopped the attack while Kelly wiped her face off, but he wasn't done. According to Kelly, he asked her if she was ready for round 2 and continued to assault her for another hour and a half before finally allowing her to leave. She went to the police, who got a much different version of the story from Saunders. Lloyd denied attacking Kelly, claiming that she had shown up at his house with the injuries that she was blaming him for. Throughout the trial, Kelly adamantly denied getting the injuries from anywhere or anyone else. While giving a victim impact statement, she said that she skipped out on her family's Christmas gathering that year due to the visible injuries to her face. After dragging its heels in court for more than 5 years, the case finally went to trial in 2022. The jury found Lloyd Saunders guilty of assault causing bodily harm, and he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. He'll be required to abide by extremely strict rules for at least 6 months following his release. Kelly also admonished Lloyd for refusing to plead guilty and take responsibility for his actions, and instead forcing her to sit through a trial. She already suffered from anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and depression due to the attack, but having to listen to her 911 call and relive other portions of the incident had a re-traumatizing effect on her. But Kelly was at least glad that she could finally finally put the case behind her and focus on moving forward, with Lloyd trailing in the dust behind her. Number 2. Edgar Latulip. Every year, somewhere between 70 and 80,000 people go missing in Canada. The vast majority are found within a week of their disappearance, but every now and then, a case lingers unsolved for an unusually long time. One of the longest-running missing persons cases in the country's history began in 1986 when 21-year-old Edgar Latulip took a bus from Kitchener to Niagara Falls. The two cities are only about a 90-minute drive from one another, and Edgar was an adult, but he experienced developmental delays and psychiatric problems that prevented him from being fully independent. At the time of his disappearance, Edgar had been living in a group home and surviving on disability payments. Nobody knew why he would go to Niagara Falls, including his mother, Sylvia Wilson, who became increasingly worried for her son's safety. Sylvia was particularly concerned about Edgar's mental state and the possibility that he was experiencing some sort of breakdown. The longer he spent without the resources and support system that he had access to back at home, the more Sylvia began to fear that her son had lost touch with reality. Months turned into years as Edgar's whereabouts remained a mystery. Law enforcement continued to investigate tips and follow up on leads, but each and every piece of information they received led them nowhere. Investigators naturally began to believe that Edgar was probably dead, but they at least hoped they could find his remains so he could be returned to his family and given a proper burial. Unlike many people who have a loved one go missing, Sylvia maintained a realistic view of the situation. She understood that her son might be dead. In fact, the possibility had always been in the back of her mind, even though she tried to hold out hope that maybe Edgar was alive. Much to the surprise of everyone who knew about the case, Edgar was found alive in St. Catharines, Ontario in February 2016. As investigators began to fill in the 30-year gap in their knowledge of Edgar's whereabouts, they learned that he had sustained a head injury after arriving in Niagara Falls. It may never be known why Edgar went to Niagara Falls to begin with, but during his time there, he forgot who he was and where he came from. His head injury was undoubtedly a factor in his amnesia, but it's also possible that Edgar had reached a breaking point of sorts and had decided to hit the reset button on his life. After losing his memory, Edgar simply went by another name. He lived a very simple existence, didn't know his family and friends were looking for him, or who they even were, and didn't use social media, which helps to explain how he went unidentified for so long. Finally, in 2016, bits and pieces of Edgar's memory slowly started to return. He contacted his social worker, and it took just a little more digging to figure out his real name. Sadly, only Edgar's mother seemed interested in reuniting with him. But it wasn't all bad. Now in his 50s, Edgar had achieved stability. He had his own apartment, he had friends, and his mental health had improved dramatically, even if he still experienced some setbacks. At the very least, Sylvia was relieved to learn that her son was not only alive, but that he was doing well and had been for a long time. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. Number 1. Food battery between fighting couples. While many of us have thrown something out of anger at least once in our lives, most people would probably agree that it's not the most mature or composed way for someone to handle their emotions. But some grown adults have no shame, and food seems to be an especially popular weapon when it comes to domestic disputes. In late 2018, 65-year-old Donna Lee Gramley allegedly became jealous when she found out that her roommate had bought Chinese food for their neighbors in Tarpon Springs, Florida. According to police, Gramley retrieved some of the takeout and threw it at the 64-year-old victim while he laid in bed. Gramley reportedly admitted to throwing the food and was charged with domestic battery. During that same time period, a 29-year-old Wyoming man was accused of attacking his girlfriend of 6 years with freshly made Hot Pockets. Levi Lucero also allegedly threw a phone at the woman, pinned her to their living room couch, and yelled at her. Lucero told a much different story, claiming that he threw the Hot Pocket because his girlfriend had punched him in the face while he was eating. Either way, there was no denying that Lucero's girlfriend was injured by the flying food. A witness told police that the skin on the victim's face had started blistering and falling off, indicating that she had suffered some serious burns. An arrest report noted that the victim had hot pocket shrapnel all over her neck and shirt as she was being loaded onto an ambulance. In yet another food battery incident that made news headlines in November 2018, a 33-year-old McDonald's employee named Tequila Cohen allegedly cornered her manager and tried to shove bacon in their mouth. According to a police report, the manager tried shoving Cohen away and was punched in the face with a fistful of bacon. Cohen fled the scene before police arrived and was charged with assault and battery. Throwing some food at your partner during a moment of anger may not seem like going over the edge, but it certainly doesn't reflect the actions of a rational adult who's able to articulate their feelings in a more civilized and respectful way. It's also an easy way to escalate a fight, rather than taking a solution-oriented approach.
9. Annaya Peterson. When Australian model Amber Luke went viral in 2019 for having her eyeballs tattooed blue, most people thought it was crazy. But Annaya Peterson liked it so much, she went and got it done despite her 7-year-old daughter's concerns that the ink might cause her to go blind. The law student and mother of 5 from Belfast, Ireland, got her left eye tattooed blue in 2020. She experienced headaches and dry eyes, but chalked it up to the normal healing process and got her right eye dyed purple 5 months later. Things went fine until several months later, when Annaya woke up with extremely swollen eyelids, like she had been punched in the face. The doctor prescribed some antibiotics, but they failed to alleviate the inflammation. Annaya went to the hospital, where doctors ran tests and a biopsy and performed surgery, which she later said left her feeling traumatized. She soon learned that the tattoos have put her at a very high likelihood of contracting glaucoma, and her vision is already starting to rapidly deteriorate. Although she's receiving support from her university, including assistive technology to make reading easier, it's a scary reality to face, knowing that someday she won't be able to see much, if anything. Needless to say, Annaya regrets getting her eyeballs tattooed and wishes she had listened to her daughter. 8. Berle Fox. At the height of his bodybuilding career, Berle Fox was one of the world's biggest and strongest bodybuilders. The 2-time Mr. Universe was 270 pounds, 122.5 kilograms of almost pure muscle, thanks to the assistance of a rigorous anabolic steroid regimen that he relied on to keep up his workouts and his appearance. As you may already know, steroids have some unpleasant side effects. Fox was notorious for his temper, which sometimes caused him to walk off the stage at bodybuilding competitions when he didn't place as well as he thought he deserved. And while it's unclear whether steroids triggered Fox's rage-filled impulse to kill his fiancée and her mother in 1997, his use of them certainly didn't help his state of mind. Fox fatally shot 20-year-old beauty queen LaCoya Brown and her mother, 36-year-old Violet Brown, in the Caribbean country of St. Kitts and Nevis. He originally received the death sentence, which was later commuted to life without parole. In 2022, the Governor General of St. Kitts and Nevis pardoned Fox, and he was released after serving 25 years. Many of his former co-competitors celebrated his newfound freedom, with some sharing their opinion that the fatal shooting was an accident, or that Fox shot his ex and her mother in self-defense. The role steroids played in the crime, if any, will likely remain a mystery and a topic of speculation. 7. Brandon Colado. There's a very fine line between being a superfan and being dangerously obsessed with a celebrity. One man managed to cross it one night in late 2022, when Elon Musk and his security detail crossed paths with an alleged stalker at a gas station outside Los Angeles in South Pasadena. Footage that appears on Twitter shows one of Musk's security guards confronting another driver in the parking lot and accusing the man of following him. A caption posted with the footage accused the other motorist of following the security guard, thinking that it was actually Musk behind the wheel. He claimed that the man blocked the car, which had Musk's young child inside, and climbed on top of the hood. According to Musk's version of things, his security guard rammed the man's vehicle before driving off. Police responded to the scene, but no arrests were made, although Musk said that he planned to pursue legal action through his own means. He failed to elaborate on the nature of the suspect's connection to him or provide any further context on the background of the situation. Musk blamed a Twitter account for tracking his whereabouts and threatened to suspend users who post a person's real-time location. The accused stalker identified himself as an Uber Eats driver named Brandon Colado, and he adamantly denies stalking Musk or his team. He said that their run-in was purely coincidental, and the police seemed to believe him. In a report of the incident, Musk's security guard is labeled as the suspect, and Colado is listed as the victim. Colado's account of being unfairly targeted seems believable on its face, but he's also put forth some bizarre theories about Elon Musk stalking him. He claimed that the billionaire had been tracking his real-time locations, not the other way around, and that Musk was somehow manipulating the Uber Eats app to stop him from getting work. The truth about what happened and who's at fault remains to be seen, but the situation clearly resulted from at least one of the two parties taking things too far. Whether it was the security guard reacting inappropriately to a misunderstanding, or Colado living up to the allegations that he's a crazed stalker. 6. Andrea Ivanova. 25-year-old Andrea Ivanova claims to have the world's biggest lips, thanks to the nearly 32 procedures she's gotten done on them at a cost of around $9,000. She began her body modification journey in 2018 and has achieved a look that, to most, looks cartoonish and unattractive. But Ivanova loves how she looks, and to each their own, right? Doctors reportedly told the Bulgarian influencer that she's going to put her life in danger if she doesn't stop with the obsessive lip injections. Her oversized pucker already complicates certain everyday activities, including eating. In November 2022, Ivanova revealed on social media that she now plans to aim for a new record: the world's most elongated and pointed chin. Ivanova had recently celebrated her birthday with jaw filler and said that she planned to continue with both her lip and her chin treatments, despite her doctor's warnings to stop. Keeping up her appearance comes at a high cost. She spends $285 on lip injections every 2 weeks. She's also gotten a breast augmentation. And while a lot of people find her appearance off-putting, Ivanova has a surprising amount of followers who seem genuinely attracted to her unusual look. 5. Cameron Douglas. Spoiled rich kids have a reputation for thinking they're above the law, especially if their parents are celebrities. And they're also known for pushing their limits so far that they wind up in a world of legal trouble. While it's unfair to automatically apply this stereotype to everyone who comes from a wealthy family, some people truly live up to the stigma. Case in point, Cameron Douglas, the oldest son of Academy Award-winning American actor Michael Douglas. Cameron's drug-related run-ins with the law began in 1999 with an arrest for cocaine possession in New York City. He pleaded guilty to a reduced charge, which is customary in that type of case, and avoided any major brushes with police until 2007, when police found a cocaine-filled syringe in his car. Just 2 years later, in 2009, Cameron was busted in a Drug Enforcement Administration sting, resulting from a 3-year drug trafficking investigation. Agents recovered a half-pound, 0.23 kilograms of methamphetamine from a Manhattan hotel room that they believe he was distributing drugs out of. Cameron ultimately admitted that he had been dealing drugs since 2006. He was originally sentenced to 5 years in prison, but the court tacked on another 4.5 years after his girlfriend was caught smuggling heroin into the prison for him. After 7 years behind bars, he was transferred to a halfway house before the 2019 release of his memoir, Long Way Home. Cameron told the New York Times that he wasn't trying to garner sympathy with his story or his decision to squander his privilege, but that perhaps his self-destructive past could help guide someone else in the right direction. He said that there was nothing anyone could have done to stop him from chasing his addictions and committing crimes, but that he hopes the cautionary tale discourages someone else from making the same mistakes. 4. A permanent punishment. In 2017, a young Brazilian man named Juan Rocha da Silva allegedly stole a bike in Sao Paulo. As a punishment, his accusers, Ronilda Moreira and Macon Wesley, tattooed "I am a thief and a loser" on the young man's forehead in Portuguese. Video of the men laughing and forcing Da Silva to reveal his tattoo soon went viral on social media. But there are consequences to taking the law into one's own hands, as Wesley and Moreira learned when they were both sentenced to 3 years in prison for the forced tattooing. In the meantime, the community sympathized with Da Silva and even started a crowdfunding campaign to raise money to get the tattoo removed. Da Silva unfortunately didn't pull himself away from his life of crime. He was arrested for theft several times over the following years and has spent time in both prison and rehab. In 2022, the troubled young man was caught red-handed during a home invasion and was sent back to jail. Photos from the arrest show that the tattoo on his forehead is still visible, but has faded, indicating that he's undergone at least some removal treatments. 3. Becky Holt and Keith Gordon. Better known as Britain's most tattooed woman, 35-year-old Becky Holt has a supportive family who doesn't judge her for covering most of her body in ink. But others are less approving, with many accusing her of taking her body modification too far and suggesting that her love for tattoos has become an unhealthy obsession. Holt believes that some people are intimidated by her ink, which even covers part of her face and includes a David Bowie lyric scrawled across her forehead. She told the Daily Star that she wished people would look past her appearance because there's more to her than just tattoos. The social media influencer and OnlyFans model has also gone under the knife multiple times, starting at the age of 20. Another heavily tattooed Brit, Keith Gordon, claims that he's gotten used to people calling him a monster because of his appearance. Known as Britain's most tattooed dad, his entire face and nearly his entire body are covered in ink. Gordon has spent upwards of 5 figures on his artwork, which includes the word Satan across one of his eyelids. The 66-year-old experienced some of the most negative responses to his appearance at the Catholic school his children attended. He said that he receives 3 main reactions, including praise, being ignored, and harsh disapproval. Even Gordon's wife of 20 years, Lisa, isn't totally comfortable with his look. She sometimes refuses to walk alongside him in public, especially when he doesn't wear a shirt, revealing an array of tattoos that includes a Confederate flag and a horned demonic face. Gordon got his first tattoos at 17, but had them removed. He stayed away from tattoo parlors until the age of 52, when he began his current transformation. Ever since, he's become hooked on getting more work done. He told the Daily Star that he accepts the negative commentary as an inevitable result of being different, and said that he's comfortable in his own skin and happy with his appearance. 2. Reuben Arzu. It's no secret that the bodybuilding world is rife with steroids, and that sometimes these dangerous drugs have extreme physical and psychological effects on their users. Coupled with other drugs, and things can quickly spin out of control. Such was the case for 22-year-old Reuben Arzu, who was using what one can only imagine was a generous helping of both steroids and other mind-altering substances in 2011. Chaos unfolded when a couple arrived at their Colton, California home one night to find Arzu naked on their front porch. The husband, Leo Rubio, confronted the 300-pound, 136-kilogram bodybuilder, who responded violently and punched the man, breaking his jaw and causing major head trauma. Rubio's wife managed to call 911 before Arzu picked her up and threw her to the ground, causing multiple lacerations and facial injuries. Neighbors surrounded the scene as the beefed-up batterer tried to flee. When the police arrived, Arzu turned his rage toward them and tried to fight them. Officers tasered him twice, which had no effect, and it ultimately took 4 cops to subdue him. Arzu was charged with attempted homicide and aggravated mayhem. His mother, Marila Arzu, told ABC7 that her son wasn't under the influence of drugs during the incident. She also claimed that Reuben wasn't a bodybuilder, but that he just enjoyed working out and that he struggled with developmental disabilities that affected his behavior and that he was on disability for. The outcome of the case is unclear. 1. An overly devoted fan. While shopping at a Primark retail store in Britain one day, Teen Mom UK star Mia Boardman was approached by a fan. Mia told the woman that it was nice to meet her, and the fan walked away. A few minutes later, the fan popped out from behind a rail, where she had apparently been hiding and watching Boardman. She asked the reality star for a photo. Mia obliged, and the fan went on her way. Later on, Mia saw that the woman had posted about the encounter in a fan group. She offered to track the teen mom down and get autographs for anyone who might be interested. This was just one of several bizarre encounters Mia's had since she rose to fame on the popular reality series. She's gotten used to people approaching her and asking for photos, but some admirers have extreme reactions to seeing her. One fan was so overwhelmed with emotion, she cried when she ran into Mia in public. The young mother's experience highlights the unique realm that reality stars live in, where they lack the security detail of a big-name celebrity, but are recognized pretty much everywhere they go.
Thanks for watching. What would you regret more? Overreacting on such an extreme level that it ruins a close friend's trust in ways that it may never recover from, or keeping your mouth shut about something that you should have spoken up about because you knew nobody would probably believe you? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.